You are here because you have finally connected the dots to realize that while most people read the news believing they are being informed, you read the news knowing you are being directed by a financial dynasty that realized 2 centuries ago that the absolute best way to own the market is to own the story. For the last 200 years, the global financial system has not been built on transparency, but on a much quieter, darker reality. That the news isn't designed to inform you. It is simply the waste product left over after the most powerful families on earth have already executed their trades, secured their positions, and extracted the value out of the event in the milliseconds before the rest of the world is even told that something has happened. Welcome to the Latency Trap. Today, we are going to deconstruct the time machine that the financial elite have used for 2 centuries to live in the future while you are stuck paying for the past. We are going to show you why, when you read a headline today, you aren't reading news, you are reading a receipt. To understand how this machinery works, we have to look back to a time before the internet, before the telephone, and even before the completion of the telegraph. We have to look at a specific gap in the map of Europe in 1850. At that time, the financial heart of the world was beating in London, but the critical information was often coming from the stock exchanges of Paris or Berlin. There was just one problem. The technology of the day was broken. The telegraph lines, the internet of the 19th century were incomplete. There was a physical, silence-filled gap between the city of Brussels in Belgium and the city of Aachen in Germany. For a normal merchant or a politician, this was just an inconvenience. It meant that news had to be carried by the mail train, a slow, chugging journey that took 9 hours to bridge the gap. For 9 hours, the markets were blind. But for the banking elite, this 9-hour blindness wasn't a problem. It was an opportunity. Enter a man named Paul Julius Reuter. Before his name became synonymous with the world's largest news agency, Reuter was a man who understood a simple, brutal truth. Information is only valuable if you have it first. While the rest of the world waited for the mail train, Reuter did something that seemed primitive, yet was financially brilliant. He bought 45 carrier pigeons. These weren't just birds, they were biological data packets. Reuter stationed them in Brussels. As soon as the stock prices or political news arrived from Paris, the messages were strapped to the birds' legs, and they were released into the sky. The result was an unprecedented arbitrage of time. The pigeons flew the distance in just 2 hours, beating the train by a full 7 hours. This wasn't just a delivery service, it was a form of time travel. It meant that for 7 hours, Reuter and his private subscribers existed in the future, while everyone else, the merchants, the politicians, the public, was stuck in the past. And who were the primary clients willing to pay a fortune for this speed? It wasn't the newspapers. It was the banking dynasties. It was families like the Rothschilds, who understood that those 7 hours of silence were where the real fortune was made. Nathan Rothschild didn't just subscribe to this service, he invested in the infrastructure of speed itself. Archives show he purchased Burmarsh Farm on the coast of Kent, specifically to station his own private network of pigeons and couriers. He knew that if he could get the news from the continent even a few hours before the King of England, the market was his to control. He wasn't buying news, he was buying time. But as the telegraph lines were finally completed and the gap closed, the game had to evolve. Competition is dangerous for profit. If everyone has a pigeon, no one has an advantage. So, in 1859, a secret meeting took place that would define the next century of global information. The 3 kings of news, Paul Reuter in London, Charles Louis Havas in Paris, and Bernhard Wolff in Berlin, sat down and signed a legal document known as the Ring Combination. This document was a treaty of information cartels. They took a map of the world and carved it up like a steak. Havas was given exclusive control over the news from the Latin world France, Italy, Spain, and South America. Wolff was given the Germanic territories and Russia, and Reuter took the crown jewel, the entire British Empire and the Far East. They agreed not to compete, they agreed not to contradict each other. It was the first time in history that the world's news was centralized into a single, synchronized narrative. Think about the implications of that. For over 80 years, if a war broke out in South America, the people in London only knew what Havas decided to tell Reuter. If a bank crashed in Berlin, the people in Paris only knew what Wolff decided to tell Havas. The news ceased to be an objective reality. It became a product, managed and distributed by a monopoly that was funded from day one by the banking elite. The Rothschilds and their peers didn't need to own the newspapers to control the narrative. They just needed to be the patrons of the wire services, the first ones to see the telegram, the first ones to read the pigeon's message. This was the birth of the system we live in today, a system where the truth is tiered. Tier 1 is for the patrons, the raw, instant data that allows them to trade. Tier 2 is for the public, the delayed, packaged narrative that allows them to be the exit liquidity for the patrons. And if you think this system died with the pigeons and the telegraphs, you are dangerously mistaken. The technology has changed, but the mechanism has only gotten faster. Now, you might ask, why would 3 independent newsmen agree to stop competing? Why carve up the world and silence their own reporters? The answer lies not in who was writing the news, but in who was paying for it. We know from the historical archives that the Rothschilds and their banking peers were not merely passive readers of the news. They were the architects of the infrastructure that carried it. The relationship between the banking elite and these early news agencies was not one of ownership in the traditional sense. It was a relationship of patronage. The bankers were the premium subscribers. They were the patrons who needed the data first. This created a mechanism that still governs our world today, the concept of the two-tiered truth. To understand this, you have to stop thinking of news as information. You have to start thinking of it as a commodity, like ice. At the moment an event happens, a king dies, a treaty is signed, or a bank fails, that information is at its absolute freezing point. It is solid, valuable, and actionable. This is Tier 1. Tier 1 flows instantly through the private channels, the pigeons of 1,850, the telegraphs of 1,900, or the fiber optics of today, directly to the patron. When Nathan Rothschild received the news of a victory or a defeat, he didn't publish it. He traded on it. He used that window of silence, that latency gap, to execute his positions. If the news was bad, he sold before the crash. If the news was good, he bought before the boom. Then, and only then, does the information move to Tier 2. Tier 2 is the melted ice. It is the story that gets printed in the newspaper the next morning. It is the headline that flashes on your screen. By the time the ink is dry, or the pixel is lit, the value of that information has already been extracted. The market has already moved. The asset has already been repriced. But before we look at the modern algorithms, we must understand the blueprint. To see the raw power of Tier 1 access, we don't need to look at a contract. We need to look at a battlefield. The most famous example of this is not a myth. It is a matter of logistics. We call it the Waterloo arbitrage. In 1815, during the Battle of Waterloo, the entire fate of the British economy hung in the balance. If Napoleon won, British bonds would collapse. If Wellington won, they would soar. History tells us that Nathan Rothschild's agents were on the battlefield. They didn't wait for the official military dispatch. As soon as the battle turned, they raced back to the coast. Whether they used a fast boat or the family's pigeon network is a detail for historians to argue over. What matters is the physics of the transaction. Nathan Rothschild stood in the London Stock Exchange a full day before the official government messenger arrived. He knew the truth. The rest of the floor did not. Whether he leaned against the pillar to signal panic or simply stood silent is irrelevant. The math remains the same, but the mechanism is undeniable. Information asymmetry. He was buying British debt for pennies on the pound from people who thought they were holding worthless paper. When the official news finally arrived, Tier 2, the prices skyrocketed. The public cheered for the victory, but the wealth had already been transferred. The people who read the news in the paper were not the beneficiaries of the victory. They were the exit liquidity for the man who knew it first. This is the trap. The system is designed to make you feel informed while keeping you perfectly delayed. When you see a crisis on the news and you rush to sell your stocks in fear, who are you selling to? You are selling to the algorithm that knew about the crisis 500 milliseconds ago and is now buying the dip. When you see a boom and rush to buy, who are you buying from? You are buying from the patron who entered the position days ago and is now cashing out. You are not participating in the market. You are simply paying the bill for the people who run the infrastructure. The news agency wasn't built to tell you the truth. It was built to distract you while the transaction clears. So, has anything actually changed? We traded the pigeons for fiber optic cables. We traded the telegraph for high-frequency trading algorithms. But the mechanism of the latency trap hasn't just survived. It has been perfected. Today, we don't look for a cartel of 3 men in a room. We look at the collocation centers near the New York and London stock exchanges. In the 19th century, Nathan Rothschild bought a farm on the coast to be physically closer to the news coming from France. Today, firms like BlackRock and Citadel pay millions of dollars to rent server space physically closer to the exchange's matching engine. Why? Because light travels at a finite speed. By placing their servers a few hundred feet closer than yours, they gain a speed advantage of a few microseconds. It is the exact same strategy. It is the Burmarsh farm of the digital age. And just like the Rothschilds were the patrons of the early wire services, the modern financial elite are the patrons of the machine-readable news feeds. Reuters and Bloomberg don't just sell news to humans. They sell direct data feeds to the AI systems of the world's largest asset manager systems like BlackRock's Aladdin. These systems do not wait for a news anchor to read a teleprompter. They are hardwired into the source. When a headline is generated, it is read by a machine in microseconds. The algorithm analyzes the keywords war, rate hike, inflation, calculates the center, who bought in that gap, who drove the price up before you were even told there was a reason to buy. You are looking at the modern pigeon gap. The price moved because the patrons received the signal first. By the time the notification reaches you, the opportunity is gone. You are not buying the asset, you are providing the exit liquidity. And the ring combination of 1,859, the treaty that divided the world, it never went away. It just rebranded. Today we have the Trusted News Initiative, a global partnership between the world's largest news agencies and big tech platforms. They claim it is to fight misinformation. But if you look at the structure, it is a mirror image of the 1,859 cartel. It is a consolidation of narrative. It ensures that on critical issues, every screen in the world tells the exact same story at the exact same time, protecting the exact same interests. The Rothschilds taught the world a lesson 2 centuries ago that most of us still haven't learned. That money isn't just currency, it is information. History, they say, is written by the victors, but perhaps it is more accurate to say that history is written by those who own the ink. From the carrier pigeons of Waterloo to the AI servers of Wall Street, the game remains rigorously consistent. The goal is not to inform you. The goal is to keep you synchronized. To keep you reacting to the past, so you never notice who is owning the future. So the next time the world seems to erupt in a synchronized crisis, and every newspaper, every app, and every channel screams the exact same headline at you, pause. Ask yourself a simple question. Who knew this 1 minute ago? And what did they buy while I was busy being afraid? The latency trap is set. The only way to escape it is to stop reading the receipt and start following the money. In the next dossier, we are going to leave the world of digital signals and return to the ground. We will dig into the black blood that powers this entire machine. We're going to expose the Rothschilds' grip on energy, from the oil fields of Baku to the green agenda of tomorrow. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because by the time you hear about it on the news, it will be too late.